Hey everyone, this is Kyle White. I'm your TA for ARC 283 this term. Today it's like the 10th of February, so I figured I would create a video that would give you guys some help on technical drawings as we're requiring for assignments 4 and assignments 5. This video today is a little unpracticed, and you'll probably see a bunch of cuts and things like that, which is me trying to save some time so that you guys can use this video wisely. Um, Overall, my goal is to show you some better control techniques for your drawings. So I'm going to first start with line weights and just overall drawing tips. So using your different line weights and your line thicknesses. I'll then jump into some helpful tips about the plans. So a couple of you I see have issues with like pochés or how to show trees and things like that. So I'll get into that. And then sections and elevations will include, same sort of thing like pochés and line weights and things like that. So feel free to kind of skip around in the video. I'll try to keep headers on all of the work that I'm doing. And we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so this is kind of line weights. So this is line weights and drawing tips. Um, and the point is that we're not in the studio, and many of you don't have access to your typical kind of um, drafting board. So this should kind of provide some insight on what we're looking for. So this is a little sample setup that I've created. Essentially, I have an underlay of like a thick cardstock, and then I have just my actual drawing surface taped on top with masking tape, make sure it's removable. And all I really need is this square here. If you can use the edge of your table with the T-square, feel free to do that. Um, but the point is that you're going to want to keep everything referenced essentially to that edge. So you're creating clean parallel lines. On top of that, what you do is I'm sure you already all know this, you're going to be working in a scale. So for this one, it doesn't really matter, but I'll just put it on like 1/8 scale. So this will be your typical drawing setup. Um, Talking about materiality, I mean, types of uh, drawing ways of drawing. So I like to use lead-based pencils. So I have a 0.3. This is a 0.9 actually, and then this is a 0.7. These are all HB. You can get them in 2B and 2H, and you can use it this way. It's a little more expensive. This was a Christmas gift, so I have the luxury of using it this way. Most of you, however, I believe are using these guys, which probably seem pretty familiar. So really, when you're working with these, I would say, because we're in an online format, stay to the heavier pieces. So I have a 2H and HB, and then a 2B and a 6B for the darkest lines. These guys, when you're working in them, you're going to want to keep them sharp. These are actually a little bit used and not, not the best, but yeah, we'll use these today because I think that's what most of you are using. Also, when you're sketching, great pen is this guy. So he's a Japanese Sino pen, and that's what the store has. And of course, you're going to have your handy dandy roll of tracing paper, and that really creates, some really nice, clean sketches that you can use later on. It makes a nice bold presentation, even if you're just trying to get a point across really quickly, as you automatically read what I've created. Okay, but that's not what we're focusing on. So when you're drawing, you're going to want to definitely keep everything aligned, as we noted before, to the edge of the table. And when you're using these guys, we'll start with an HB. You're not only going to be using the actual softness of the lead, but you're also going to be using pressure. So an HB medium line, and as soon as you draw, you're going to want to start rotating the barrel of your pencil, and that will create a much more even line. You're then going to want to brush it off essentially every single time so that you're not getting a bunch of dust everywhere. So that's an HB. We then have our 6B, and I'll do these pretty quick. And you can see that with additional pressure, you can it creates a bunch of dust, but it creates a thicker line as well. But you can see just from this one kind of example, the difference between medium, and darker. And then we have our 2H, which I'll just place above somewhere because then we can have a nice clean gradient. Again, brush that off. See, and so this is one of the hard things is like, okay, that was 2 lines of 2H and it's looking a lot like HB. So if I were to redo that, I'd probably erase that line and just do it once. Yeah, and that's created a much kind of a lighter line, as you can see, like from this area to that area to that guy. So you're not only using pressure because like, or you're duplicating efforts, but like a really heavy 6B, you know, maybe gone multiple times, gets you an even bolder line there. And it's very gentle. I'll also note that if you guys are noticing shaking camera, I'm using like a really janky arm setup, so I apologize. So these are kind of the basics of what you want to use. And you want to keep in mind that when you use a darker or deeper or softer lead, it's going to create a thicker line, which is proper. If you use these technical pens, you get really clean thicknesses. So this is the 9, the 0.9, and then like the 7 right below it, 0.7, and then whoops, lead cracking is always a problem. Oh my goodness gracious. See, it's a pain. And then your 0.3. So these are all the same, you know, these are not bolder, they're simply just thicker. They're all HBs. So this is drawing tips and line weights that way. And one last thing that a lot of you are picking up on is it's important to keep nice, even, clean lines the entire time. But the biggest thing is your corners. So we'll do like this guy. And then what you can do is you can kind of guesstimate it a little bit. And you're going to want to make sure your corner, actually, so you can do 2 types of corners. So you can do an intersecting corner, which are for sketches. But primarily for our final drawings, you want to just go right up to the edge and really highlight home that soft corner there. So another thing that I just did wrong, that's my problem, is you never want to push forward on your lead. Never do that. You're going to want to always just pull back, because it creates, like, there's little thin spots versus even spots when you, so never pull, push forward. Okay. So hopefully whoever's fast forwarding can see these 3 elements and using all of our line weights. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section, which is plans. And so one of the first things that we wanted to discuss is textures, poche, and then we'll go into side elements and kind of the topo lines that we've been seeing going on. And the important thing is that whenever you're drawing, the most critical way of making a clear drawing is understanding where to place your elements along kind of the line weights or the softness of your lead scale. So what are the darkest versus what are the lightest elements? None of them should be the same. They should have a variation. So in plans, the darkest elements are going to be your cut elements. So when you cut through walls, when you cut through doors, and these will also go along with your poche. So that would probably be like a 4B. Your casework and your furniture is probably like a B, you know, so you're getting something dark, it's noticeable because it's architectural. And then your dashed above line, so if something's overhead, you're probably getting into the HHB range. And anytime you add textures or patterns to your surface, it shouldn't distract from what the actual architectural element is. So that's probably looking closer to 2B or 4B. But this is, you know, a key way to make your drawing successful is understanding, you know, essentially how your thicknesses work. So, for example, we're going to look at a plan. And we're just going to do something real quick and simple and dirty. For the purposes of today's lecture, the little tutorial here, I'm not going to be critical about dimensioning. You obviously would want to keep everything to some sort of scale, so you'd be measuring along your scale and making sure you get all those distances the same. You have the same wall thickness and things like that. But for today, we're just going to keep it kind of dirty. So the idea of what we're going to create is essentially just kind of a hollowed out cube, okay? And we're going to try to show, maybe what we'll do is we'll create like a little, I don't know, porch on it as well. And then we can also show a window. Okay, so this is occupiable, so the walls are going to have thickness. So we'll start out with plan, and we're going to cut at basically 3 to 4 feet above grade. So we're going to cut through all these walls. Crafting these final elements, you're going to definitely be using a scale. For me, I'm just trying to do this kind of quickly so that you guys don't get bored. The point is, when you're drawing a plan, you know, you're going to want to keep your area dust free, and you're going to want to make sure that all your lines and you're rotating your pencil are nice and even and clean. When it comes to drawing, this is like a 2B, this is a 2B pencil, which means that I'm getting a slightly thicker line weight. And you can already see like this sort of stuff happens, and it's important to go back and begin to erase those little mistakes and then touch up that corner again. Okay, and that makes it really nice and clean and clear. Now, if we're looking at this facade, as that guy, we have our thicker line weights, right? And we have the edge of our window, and we'd grab a lighter pencil and we'd start to create a window. So we just show like 1 or 2 lines in a lighter line weight, and then we'd pick up right where we left off, trying to keep, you know, some nice clean line work. Okay, so like even these little guys that aren't there, and like you should try to pick up on the smallest of details. When you do this, because there's a window below, you're also going to want to draw a line here, which then now you can start to see why gradients of line weights are hard, because now it's like, what is going on here? So I'm going to go back through and I'm going to just darken up the glazing cut. And so now that reads as a really nice line. I'm then going to show, okay, we'll just keep going. So I'll quickly make a porch. Dragging on the pencil is incorrect, but I'm doing it anyway because, you know, we all make mistakes. But the point is like I'm watching to make sure the lead stays pretty even. Okay, so we'll do something like this. And like this stuff is not acceptable, so I go back and I'll try to pick up right where I left off, and that's pretty clean. Okay, so same thing, and we'll do same thing. Whoop, uneven line, so erase it. It's a little harder when you use these pencils because they tend to like to stay on the paper. So redraw that guy, rotating the barrel, connecting the corner, and then connecting the corner. Great. So this is looking pretty good, right? So we have like this porch thing, and this is all out of proportion now. So really it's this longer element, but we have a porch in our corner, and actually this is completely wrong, but you all get it. So we have a porch, actually it's here. Use your little architectural creativity, I guess, to understand my mess. And I want to show the floor below. So the edge of like a pad or something. So I shift to an HB pencil. I don't use as much pressure. And then I have lighter line weights there. And then I have, like, let's say I had a little corner column. What you're going to want to do is I have like a little tracer guy here. So we're going to just make it 1/8. And that needs to be darker because that's getting cut through. Okay? So this is how you do a window. That's how you do your column. And we'll certainly go through and we'll poche. So there's multiple ways of poching. Everyone's kind of all over the board this term. One of the best ways is you could use vellum, but a lot of you aren't using vellum, which is fine. So when you poche, it gets to be a little more difficult. Take a lighter, like an HB, and you're going to want to just really evenly go through and fill in the poche and get from edge to edge. And the trick of a nice poche is that you're going to want to keep at the same angle and relatively the same pressure the entire time. What we don't want to see is actually like this. We don't want to see like line strokes. We don't want to see that gradient. We want to see a nice smooth transition. And then I usually go through really lightly and just fill in around the very edges. If you use vellum, you can use the other side and what that does is it blurs the line between what's filled in and what's not. But you got to pick up and lighten if you're reconnecting, you got to lighten your pencil and try to begin to blend it in a little bit. Okay? There we go. If you want to do a more graphic one, I don't recommend this, but a lot of you are doing it, so you can do these individual lines. You have to have a real good eye for this because you got to keep, like that guy is already too far over and it's already looking a little bit messy. You can see how unclear that is compared to down here. So same thing with the column, is you just fill that guy in. Okay? When you're doing site elements, so this is a nice kind of drawing diagram. If you had like a kitchen here, for example, like a kitchen cabinet, what you do is you take your HB, so we're not using our darkest, and the edge of your counter would be like so, one clean line. And your overhead lines would be slightly lighter, so a little less pressure on it. Actually, I might darken that up just a bit. All right? And kitchen cabinets would be above. So you're going to want to just make nice, even dashed lines. Boom. Whenever you do a dashed line, you got to show the corners. Okay. There we go. And then you have like a little kitchen. If you had like a sink here, which would be kind of nice because it's right in front of the window, you'd show a sink, and then you'd draw a little spigot, right? End those ends, and boom, you have a little sink in front of your window. For our assignment also, we'll move into site elements, and this is taking longer than I expected. So if you're moving into a site element, you want to do a tree. A lot of you are in a bunch of different styles. Typically, you're going to want to show a tree as a dashed line overhead. So like if I had a little tree there, I'd show a little trunk. It gets cut through. So that gets a nice poche. And then, for example, you can use like a ring or something. Or, let's see. Hold on, I'll be right back. Okay, or like I didn't have anything particularly well done, so I'm going to use like this glue bottle as just a rough outline. So really lightly, I'm going to just trace the perimeter, expecting that I'm going to erase it all. And as you can see, like that's completely off center, so this is part of the problem. So like you'd want to redo this. But frankly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase my trunk just for the simplicity. And then you're going to go through with your HB and you're going to create the dashed line overhead. Nice and even, you know, dashes around. You can see how like oblong this guy is looking. And then I'm going to move, that's probably center. So move this back. Nice dark perimeter. Fill that in. Finish my dash. Some people, there's another way you could do it. You could do it like, I'll just freehand it. So you can set like a really quick light outline. Got to put your trunk in the middle, which you do with this guy. Zoop. And then there's also a style where you can do like you basically make V's off to the edge and then get them to be thicker. So if you have like really significant landscape, you know, this might be the best way to go. But you essentially poke all the V's in at the end to do so. Okay. Last but not least, if you want to show texture, so like let's say you had a site plan with some like paving stones that went around like that, you know, you'd probably show, you'd freehand these like they're slate or something, and you'd want to do them light in like a 2H, and you'd show, you know, really kind of carefully curated stones. Like that guy was a little too bumpy for my taste, so I'm going to make the next guy a little smoother, and then maybe there's a little in-between path, you know, something like this. Okay, so these are kind of the basic elements. If you want to do textures, again, you can still see that the 2B is the most highlighted thing compared to all of our tree, and not really even that guy. But if you wanted to do like a hatch pattern, so like grass, you could stipple it. You just kind of do like little 30-degree pieces in randomized patterns. It's also better if you begin to kind of change density over time, so it looks like little fields of patterning. That's one way to get grass. If you wanted to do, you know, floorboards, you'd have to measure all these out, but you can just really lightly begin to suggest textures. On your deck. Okay, and then see how light those are? Really light compared to everything else. So these are just a few ways, and like if your path is super important, maybe these guys become a little more defined. You know, maybe you go back over with a darker lead or something like this, but I've been using the 2H for all of these additional details. Once you get through that cut line, that's your darkest line, is through the wall. So hopefully this helps. I don't recommend putting people in, but if you can get something of scale into your drawings, that's going to be super helpful. Whether that's a door, which, you know, we're a little bit behind, but I'll probably split this movie into segments or something. You know, and we'll just put a single line. I would go through and I'm going to erase the threshold because you wouldn't see it. Well, you'd see it, but it wouldn't be a plan element. It wouldn't be getting cut through, so it wouldn't be as dark. I'm going to go through, refine the edges. and then make our door would probably swing this way. And this takes some time to master. Make sure you get that arc really nice. If you have a compass, use a compass. So you'll notice another jump cut here, and that's because I forgot something. So we're working in topography. So a lot of you are showing topography lines. And these are really kind of freehand. So you're going to want to stay with a 2H pencil. Keep it nice and light. It shouldn't be the number one piece. But your topo lines should be kind of these continuous, nice curved lines, which I think you all understand. And even though, even though everyone's site is a little bit different, when you have a nice even slope, you'll have even spacing in between your topography. And you're trying to think of how like water would flow and dirt would flow. So like this becomes steeper because these spaces are closer together. So like if I started to show, something like this, that's telling me there's a huge steep cut. And if I continue that and to do like this, I've essentially created a cliff, of topography. And so I think for us, we're not asking, but typically what you do is if you wanted to mark these, you'd mark them like, +5, +4, +3, +2, +1, 0. Or, it depends on like really your elevation points. A lot of times you'll make decisions where like this, if this is at 0, you wouldn't do these at +5. You'd start 0 here, -1, -2, -3, etc., etc. Okay, so I wanted to put that in there. That should be a 2H pencil for your topography lines and nice, clean, swooping curves. Okay, welcome to section 3, which is sections and elevation drawing tips. This video series is a little bit longer than I expected, but I hope you can all kind of get through it. We're going to start off with kind of the proper line wakes and the poche discussion that we had before, and we're going to talk about some elevations and probably some like scale figures and elements, and like trees and things like that. So line elements. Okay, so you've made it. So much like we started with the plan, the biggest thing is understanding our darkest to lightest scale again. So for sections, it's much more complicated, but it is extremely important, or sections can become increasingly confusing. So your darkest item is going to be your topo. It's going to be your ground line. This can either be like a ground line, or it can be your like rocks or boulders that you're cutting through and things like that. It's not like trees. Trees are not that important. Next is your building elements, so your walls and your roofs. It's actually like the architectural ones. Your architectural building elements, this is like your casework. So your cabinets, if you're cutting through like a door or something like that, these are all still fairly dark, but there's still a logic to them because this is the highest priority, and then it goes down. Once you get through the sections, so once you stop cutting through stuff, your closer objects are gonna still have a medium line weight, with your scale figures a little lighter than that, and the farthest objects are gonna be the lightest. This part is where a lot of drawings could use some help. So if you can, begin to understand those sorts of elements, you're gonna do just great. Okay, so jumping right in, we're going to take our cabin that we did essentially from the plan drawing. You can see I didn't really develop it that much further. I erased some of the elements, and you can still kind of see them. Ideally, you'd get rid of these completely, but it's not working, not worth the time. So when you're drawing a section, the first thing that you have to do is you have to mark where your section is cutting. So I'm sure you all know this. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through a window, and we'll show the faucet, I guess. So what you do is you draw a single line that breaks in the middle of your building. And this depends on like the busyness of your drawing. Whoops. The busyness of your drawing, etc. But you usually freehand these. You then put two triangles showing the direction that you're cutting. So in like a construction project, this would get a header that says like, actually here, I'll erase it and I'll show you because it's worth it. You'd take your little half circle and this would get a header, and that would say the drawing title and the drawing page number, as you probably know. So like we'll just do 1A 1.0. Okay, but that tells us which way it's cutting and which way it's facing. So that being said, I need to rotate my plan so that I can translate everything across. So hold on. Okay, so I've rotated my plan, and this way what I can do is I can start to pull the lines down from the drawing up above. So that way they stay in proportion. And I'm gonna just tilt this slightly so you get more drawing space. So the first thing first is that we need to understand our base topography. So what you do is you start with I'll go way down to the bottom. You start with a bottom line that's relatively light, and no one's really looking for this. And you then have to kind of decide. I have probably about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to say like 6 blocks of topography. So I'm 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to put my building approximately on like this guy, you know, just so I can reference. And what we're going to do is we're going to start to intersect, see where our section cut is intersecting, and bring the lines down. So I know that my topography goes to there. I'm going to pull it up to here, which goes to the next grid up. So I've made one. Okay, sorry about that. So apparently when your phone runs out of memory, it just stops recording without telling you. So where we were at was essentially we're just going through and we're just pulling lines down and finding the intersection of the planes. So here is like -3 because it intersects with that line above. -2 intersects with that line above. -1 intersects somewhere around here on this contour. And I would suspect probably somewhere around here would be the 0. I know that our building entrance is going to be flush with 0, you know, so it's marked as 0. So I just drew a general line knowing where our walls were going to be. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take our thicker pencil, and much like the walls, we're going to keep the same language, and we're going to take our 2B, and we're going to pull our lines down on what we're cutting through. So we're looking at these intersections. So I'm going to just make a general building height around there. We're going to just pull this line down too. And this is the funny thing about sections. It's a little confusing on exactly what we're trying to draw. So like I'm now going to go through a window. So I know below the window there's a solid wall, you know, and there's going to be cabinets. So I'm going to just draw it probably like that height. And then pull this guy down to like that height. Okay. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to say that I know my floor's here. So we're going to take our 2B and we're going to cut through our floor. So we're going to go corner to corner, nice and thick. We're going to do the same thing and cut the sill of our window. Okay. Boom. I'm trying to fill in these little corners. I got completely blindsided by this whole thing. And as I said in our gradient, you know, architectural items are like a 2B, you know, so it matches what's happening in the plan. So we're going to cut our wall like that. And then I'm going to say I need to cut my window. That's probably about yay high. So I'm going to just draw a single line. Okay. Scales are not great. You'd measure out all these things if you were doing an actual project. And then, I'm just going to start to figure out what the roof wants to be. So I'm going to say it's probably something like this. And I want like a vaulted ceiling. So I'll say, 2B, nice thick line. Knowing that I'm going to have it intersecting with the wall. So I'll continue the wall a little bit back. It's a little bit of back and forth in section, right? Because now I have to finish this guy out. And you get used to these sorts of things. Your eye will get better at it over practice. And then I'm going to say, let's see, do I want an overhang? I don't have an overhang noted anywhere on our plan, but for purposes of design, I'll say we have we'll add an overhang, okay? And we'll just have a flush back, I guess. The top of our roof is going to be probably similar thickness to the wall for a cabin like this. So I'm going to just pull that out. I'm going to try to connect all of our dots with this 2B. And then, this overhang's not great. So like you could do sun studies and stuff, but I'm just going to keep it simple for this. So we'll do a little 90 degree, really close it out. And because I added this overhang, I need to show that in plan. So I'm going to go back to an HB pencil, a little lighter, and I'm going to put dashed lines where the overhang is located. So it's somewhere around here. Okay. Always connect the corners of your dashed lines. Boom. And so now when you read the plan, you know that there's an overhang, and now it's showing up in section. We then now our sections intersecting with our kitchen cabinets. Okay, so we're going to just pull those down roughly. And those are going to go into an HB. It's looking like my alignment wasn't 100% perfect, so I'm going to just fudge it just a little bit so it doesn't look so strange. And our cabinets should be simple. They're not the most important element. So we're going to just make a general, put our window sill, maybe at the height of the counter, and then leave it as just this generic outline. You could add a little door handle if you wanted one. You also have cabinets beyond. So that makes us remember that we have a wall beyond. So we're still in HB. We're going to then just, much like the window and plan, we're going to come through and we're going to show kind of a faint line of the wall beyond. So an issue is that, like, see how far recessed in that is compared to that guy? So they don't align. So I'm actually going to respond to that, recognize that mistake, and move it. Really, I'm just going to use the HB as a nice thick line. Okay. That gets us something a little closer. So, smudges. See, this is why you got to use the brush all the time. Even I'm not great at that. Gonna want to just watch out for these little tidbits. So now that we have the wall beyond, we can recognize that the cabinets, we're not cutting through them because there's none above our sink, but we do have a sink that we'd see the faucet of, right? So we'll go to 2H. We'll just kind of freehand a faucet, really kind of light. Same thing with the cabinets. So cabinets are roughly half the thickness. So I'm just going to essentially draw something like this. So really light compared to the rest of everything else. You're then going to want to poche, much like you did in the plan above, all your walls, and I won't bore you with all that. So we'll just do a little bit. Nice even poche, fill in against the edges, take your time, listen to a podcast. Do it that way. Okay, beautiful. So you'd continue for the rest of that. As I said, the darkest line is going to be your topography. So knowing that we have cut and we've created these points, what I'm going to do is recognize that our wall will need to continue down. So if I connected these two lines, I have a rough diagonal, right? These 2 points, I'll have a rough diagonal. So I'm going to bring the wall down to it approximately, right? Knowing that my wall would have to go deeper to meet up with grade. And then I'm going to just use a really thick topo line to connect all the dots. Okay? And then it's going to pick back up and probably do something like this. So there's multiple ways you can poche and you can fill this in. So now that we have this nice hierarchy in our topography, you can either fully poche it or you can just leave it as a line. I like to show some sort of, this one's a toughie. I would probably fully poche it. And what you do is you wouldn't do the full thing. You just do enough so that it all begins to connect. And part of that is just trying to understand that this cabin is now placed directly into the land. You know, it's not like we lifted it above the ground and it's on stilts. It's like this, the point of this floor is that it's right on ground level, and therefore it makes sense to kind of poche the whole thing somewhat evenly. This is my HB pencil again, trying to keep those 45s, etc., etc. Okay. So do something like that. Okay. We're going to erase our reference line from back in the day. Beautiful. And now it's really easy to see, you know, the difference between building and land. I'm just going to finish this. I'll probably snip this. Okay, so I've finished out the poche. You can see that my lines are a little bit light, so I'll probably just go through and kind of redarken some of them, just so that they match the plan language above. Okay, beautiful. So in our plan above, we have that little jog where the door is, right? So what we're going to want to show is that jog really kind of lightly in the space. So we'll bring it down. It's going to be just a single line because that's all we're going to do. And this is a 2H. So these are the objects that are farthest away. So we don't want to see, we barely want to even know that that line is there. Frankly, this line's a little hefty, so I might just brush it. And then what you can do is you can start to add little details to your interior. So every room has like mop boards. So you can start to take your 2B and really kind of lightly suggest mop boards. You know, maybe you want to put a series of lights or something. But essentially all these details, like our faucet's going to remain darker because it's closer. And then all of these other details are going to be really light because they have less priority. Okay, so that's great. Now we have to look beyond our building, and this is a really good cross section. Now we have to go look kind of beyond our building and recognize that we have like a tree and that our topography continues. So when their topography continues, you just want to kind of show some sort of continuation. It doesn't have to make a bunch of sense, but what we're trying to do is just essentially make context, kind of like just some sort of ground plane. And then we have the tree that we drew, which is right behind our building. So what I'm going to do is it should be a line drawing, just like everything else. So I'll sketch out one just to make sure it's kind of what I want. So it's one kind of textured line. It should be extremely light. That doesn't look good. I'm going to try maybe a different style. Maybe I'll do kind of a pine tree. Maybe I'll move it slightly. And I think one of the things is the less texture, the more generic it becomes. So like, yeah, I think if I do that, if I just do a light kind of pine tree, it adds just a little bit of context. It recognizes that I remember that it's there, but it doesn't make it important. And lastly, like if your stones are there, you're just going to want to put in maybe just a couple lines of texture. You're not going to detail those out because they're so far away from our section cut. So last but not least are scale figures. So we want to add scale to this. So I'm going to mess around. Architects have different versions of scale figures. So like for me, if this is a cabinet, I'm probably looking at a guy around this height. There's like this form, which I'm not a huge fan of. Maybe I'll do a guy with like shoulders. This is kind of my go-to, is like this kind of oblong. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Some folks do like if you have a really kind of fluid, crazy dynamic thing, they do like something like this. I don't know, that's not my thing, but you can develop your own. So I'm going to do kind of this middle guy because that's who I like. Once you have it sketched out, just have confidence. Return to your drawing. Draw your guy. He's looking a little lopsided, like he's looking down at something, so we're just going to fix his head real quick. Okay. And then the mop board doesn't go through him anymore, so you got to erase that. Okay. And there you have it. You have kind of a tree, you have our scale figure, you have a nice section, you've learned how to crochet. Again, so the gradient is the most key part. Farthest items are lightest. Our scale figures are somewhat medium. Closer items, such as our faucet, are a little darker. Cut through casework is not as important as the walls, so it doesn't get pochade. And then, 2B on our walls, and the darkest is our topography line. Give it a little bit of context. If you wanted to, you could even, maybe put in, if you're a bit of an artist, just really kind of simplify maybe a mountain or something. You could add plant life if that's part of it. The goal is that you create something really clean. Boom, I know exactly what this space looks like. Hope this was helpful, and again, the TAs are here if you need any assistance.